In the year 541 AD, as the Byzantine Empire basked in the glory of its territorial reconquests under Emperor Justinian I, a silent terror crept across its borders, an invisible killer that would become one of the deadliest pandemics in human history. Known to us now as the Plague of Justinian, it began innocuously, almost invisibly, in the Egyptian port of Pelusium. There, near the mouth of the Nile, rats from grain ships brought in from India or East Africa carried fleas infected with a strange, deadly bacterium, Yersinia pestis. What followed was not just a health crisis, but an existential threat to one of the most powerful civilizations of its time. Within months, the plague spread like wildfire across North Africa, the Levant, and into Constantinople, the beating heart of the Byzantine world. Ships bearing grain, cargo, and corpses arrived at its ports, and within days, the city descended into unspeakable horror. At its peak, an estimated 5,000 to 10,000 people died per day in Constantinople alone. Whole districts were silenced, their only sounds the wheezing coughs of the dying and the creak of carts carrying the dead. So many people died that the city ran out of places to bury them. Bodies were left in houses, piled in streets, and even dumped into the sea. Emperor Justinian himself contracted the disease, but against all odds, survived. Yet the empire would never recover its full strength. As the plague continued its relentless march across the empire, it shattered economies, halted construction projects, and decimated armies. Fields went unplanted, harvests rotted, and the tax base collapsed. The grandeur of Justinian's vision, a restored Roman Empire, was eclipsed by a dark cloud of pestilence and despair. The disease didn't discriminate. It took senators and slaves, merchants and monks, mothers and children. The symptoms were grotesque and swift. Fever, chills, vomiting, swollen lymph nodes, or buboes, that turned black and oozed pus, followed by delirium and death. Most victims died within days. Priests stopped giving last rites. Doctors abandoned their patients and people turned on one another, desperate to flee the infected. Panic gave way to fatalism. The empire's famed bureaucracy faltered. Religious processions turned into death parades and entire towns were abandoned. The plague returned in waves for over 2 centuries, each time gnawing away at the population, the economy, and the morale of the people. It's estimated that between 25 to 50 million people, nearly half the population of the Byzantine Empire, perished. In some regions, like Anatolia and Syria, entire villages vanished. Trade routes shrank, military campaigns were abandoned, and the very structure of urban life collapsed. Justinian's dream of reconquering the West withered. The Lombards invaded Italy unopposed, and the weakened empire found itself vulnerable to the rise of new powers. Historians argue that this plague accelerated the decline of classical civilization and paved the way for the feudal, fragmented world of medieval Europe. In a haunting sense, the plague was not just a biological disaster, but a civilization resetting event. The grand architecture of Constantinople, its soaring domes and marble columns, stood witness to a civilization brought to its knees not by war, but by nature's smallest assassin. Chroniclers like Procopius, who had once sung the praises of Justinian's conquests, turned bitter and apocalyptic in tone, describing the plague as divine punishment or satanic curse, and for the people living through it, it must have felt like the end of the world. Some blamed the alignment of the planets, others the wrath of God, still others the corruption of the court. But no one understood the cause, and thus no one could stop it. This ignorance only deepened the suffering. People fled from cities only to carry the plague to the countryside. Paranoia spread faster than the disease itself. Foreigners were scapegoated, wells were poisoned, and communities tore themselves apart in fear. The psychological toll was as immense as the biological one. Trust eroded, hope dimmed, civilization cracked, and when the final wave of the plague ebbed away, it left behind a world forever changed. The Byzantine Empire would survive, but it would never again be the dominant force it had once been. The economic stagnation created power vacuums across Europe and the Mediterranean. New kingdoms rose in the ashes. The Arab conquests, which began shortly after, met far less resistance than they would have had the empire remained strong. In that sense, the plague altered not just demographics but geopolitics. The balance of world power tilted, and all because of a flea. The plague of Justinian, though less remembered than the Black Death of the 14th century, was arguably just as catastrophic. It was the first recorded pandemic in human history, and the first time disease truly demonstrated its potential to alter the fate of empires. The roads of Rome, once bustling with soldiers and scholars, lay silent. The great cities of Alexandria, Antioch, and Constantinople were shadows of themselves. Civil servants could no longer collect taxes, trade ceased, and scientific inquiry stalled. Civilization, in many ways, fell into a centuries-long sleep from which it would awaken only slowly. Today, modern archaeologists and geneticists have found traces of Yersinia pestis in the teeth of plague victims from that era, confirming what ancient texts so fearfully described. But even with the clarity of modern science, the lesson remains humbling. The very foundations of human society, cities, commerce, culture, are fragile. One microbe, unseen and unfeared, can unravel what generations have built. The plague of Justinian reminds us that civilization is not just built on stone and law, but on the health and resilience of its people. And when that foundation crumbles, even the mightiest empires fall to dust.